Alright motherfuckers, this is it. Battlefield 4 tanks, M1 Abrams. The thing you gotta understand about tanks with their firepower and their armor and the overwhelming and penetrating feelings of intimidation that they insert in those who throw themselves against such a force like plastic cups of waters against a spot and constructed stone barricade is that the tanks and their presence and their actions and the success of their titans on the battlefield will decide and play the key, if not sole factor, in who it is on the ground fighting in the trenches that is on offense or defense. If your team has more tanks in the brawl, then it is your team on offense no matter what. The enemy, if consisting of a regiment of infantry, can push into your spawn at their desire, but if it is only to in the end be faced with the ferocity of enemy heavy armor, then even after pushing through the bulk of your defenses and entrenched deep into your territory, those enemies will scatter and flee your heavily armored tanks as the moths flee the flames and the burning corpses behind them. Now, tanks don't necessarily cut through enemy infantry like a butter knife cuts through butter, but that enemy infantry is definitely not going to be able to mount much of an offensive whilst those tanks are up and suppressing they bitch asses. So to win the tank battle is to put the enemy team on defense, and it is a universal truth in any competition from Battlefield 4 to football to medieval warfare that the team that spends more time on defense is the team that inevitably will lose. So, to use tanks to your team's advantage and destroy your enemies, first you must of course master the tank itself. Now pay attention. The first thing you gotta understand about tanks is the new shell reload system. If you look at the lower right corner, pay attention to the ammo counter in this particular gunfighter. I guess you could call it a cannon fight. You will notice the way in which I maneuver the field to buy time so that I might reload my shells whilst delivering justice to my enemies, the enemy armor. You start out with a nifty 5 shells. Never waste a shot. It takes about 10 seconds for a new shell to recharge on top of the cooldown time in between individual shots. What this means is that if you're firing in rapid succession, just popping motherfucking cannon shots off and shit, motherfucker, you're gonna run out of shells, and then you're gonna be faced with a dire situation where you got enemy armor of some sort doing battle with your ass, and if they have more available shells to fire, they are gonna have a distinct advantage over your dumb ass in the fight. If they have more shells, they can miss more shots. If they have more shells, you're gonna run out of shells and be sitting there with your dick in your hand taking shells to the face. So don't go wasting cannon shots on infantry, alright? You go after infantry with that secondary LMG, because what you don't want to have happen is you just wasted all your shells trying to hit one fucking slippery bastard soldier, and then suddenly a tank comes around that motherfucking corner, and you're like, oh shit, hey, time out, man, I gotta reload, and he gonna be like, okay, time out, psych, motherfucker, it's on, and long story short, he gonna open up your asshole. That shit gonna hurt, I promise you that right now. Now, obviously, there are exceptions, you know, there is a group. If there is a group of infantry, or you're confident there are no enemy vehicles around, not just tanks but jeeps or whatever else, because remember, that secondary isn't going to be very useful against anything other than infantry, then you waste a couple shells, but as a general rule, I like to try and always have at least 3 shells ready at all times, and then in the time it takes you to fire those 3 shells, you'll have generated 1 more, maybe even 2 more, so it's like 4 or 5. The biggest factor in having consistent, sustained success with your tank is shell management, alright? Shell management, shell management, shell management, and making sure you are stocked for whatever fight you think you might be about to engage in. Alright? That's where your skills, that's where your critical thinking need to lie, is shell motherfucking management. Okay? Now, tank on tank fighting is going to come down to positioning, obviously, but whereas in Battlefield 3 a lot of the times it came down to who got the first shot or who had more engineers repairing, in Battlefield 4 it's going to come down to really who got the first shot anywhere on the tank except the very front. The back sides and top of the tank are all massive critical hits, and they will disable the tank temporarily, so if you can hit one of those sweet spots, which again is anywhere except the very front of the tank, then you've basically already won that tank fight, because by the time they come out of temporary disablement, you will have had time to position yourself for another easy shot to their weak points. There are a number of tactics you can use to position yourself at their flanks. The simplest tactic is getting yourself into an elevated position. Even a slightly elevated position will allow you to drop a shot on their roof, which does massive damage. If the enemy tank you wish to engage is not yet aware of your presence, plan ahead and make sure you are charging him in a perpendicular fashion from the side. You know, take your time, choose your rushing routes with the tank. If you are close quarters, wait till the enemy tank fires off a shot, and in the brief cooldown window, rush forward to the flank and try and drop the shot on his side. Obviously, this opens up your flank to his cannon as well, but if timed properly, you'll get the first shot which should disable him, thus keeping you safe so long as you keep moving forward. And also, with that in mind, always make sure you are doing your best to keep your front facing the enemy tank or rocket launchers. And if you're facing multiple enemies wielding explosives of some sort, the best thing to do is just back up to keep them all in front of you and methodically go about eliminating them one at a time. A mistake I see a lot of players make is overestimating the tank's capabilities and sort of charging into enemy territory ready to fucking drop anyone they see, but they end up getting somewhat surrounded, even if only by 3 enemies all in different directions, weaving in and out of cover, dropping rockets, and bam, tank's gone. Best way to push towards and into enemy territory with your tank is alongside your teammates. Multiple infantry fighting one tank is only an advantageous scenario for the tank if none of those enemies have rocket launchers. If you and your tank are supported by friendly infantry, they will keep enemy rocket launcher wielders suppressed to an extent that they have a much harder time ganging up on you. If you pop smoke, which is a part of the default tank setup, not only will it throw off any guided projectiles people are shooting at you, it will also take you off the minimap if you've been spotted. This comes in handy when you're getting into fights with other tanks in areas that aren't wide open like city streets and whatnot. If you see a tank and you want to make a move to engage it, if you want to get perpendicular like I was talking about before, motherfucker, but you know you're on that motherfucking minimap of his, pop smoke right before moving up towards an attack position, alright? You will give yourself some stealth and buy yourself some time to hit that motherfucker with the surprise. Alright, now switching into third person mode periodically can be very advantageous, as this will allow you to look around corners without actually going around said corner. So keep these things in mind as general rules and tactics and things to think about as you set out to deliver justice on the battlefield with this sumbitch right here, and may the Force guide you. This is Batman, signing out.